Well, hello and welcome back. Today is the very last chapter of Watson's Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. A fine writer if there ever was one. Man, he tells a good story. That last chapter, though, was different, right? I mean, the book kind of turned a little bit, got real serious. Let's see, Joetta had gone to church, Sunday school with some people that Grandma Sands knew, and she was all dressed up so pretty, white dress and those shiny shoes, and everybody else was there at the house. And then Kenneth heard some terribly loud noise and heard all these people start, everybody was running, and he ran too, and then the whole thing got kind of strange. He saw people that had been hurt by some sort of an explosion, and I think he thought he saw Joetta. And then he was kind of dreaming in a dream state, kind of like, the whirlpool was there. And then he got back home somehow, and Joetta was there, and he thought it was an angel of Joetta, or, Joetta was dead. And then he realized she wasn't, and he realized that his mom and dad and Byron were probably at that church. And the last we heard in that chapter was his grandmother, Grandma Sands, was saying, "Don't you let that screen door hit you." The last thing I heard was Grandma Sands yelling, "Boy, if you slam that door like that again." I looked down and I saw my socks flying over the Alabama mud. Where is Kenneth headed? You think he's going back to that church? I don't know. Well, let's find out. This is the last chapter. It's chapter 15. It's called The World Famous Watson Pet Hospital. He comes up with the weirdest titles for his chapters. And then after chapter 15 is something called the Epilogue. And an epilogue is something that's put in after a book is over. And in the epilogue, he kind of explains a little bit about the civil rights movement in that time. It's kind of a history lesson. It's very good. I'll read that too. So here we go, chapter 15 and the epilogue of The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. Mama and Dad didn't know I was in the living room. We'd been back in Flint for a couple of weeks, and they were still talking about what happened, but never around us. The only thing I knew for sure was that the bomb wasn't dropped on the church by an airplane. Mama Sands called a couple of times and told them that the police thought two white men drove by in a car and threw it in during services, or maybe they had already hidden it in the church with a clock to go off during Sunday school. However it got into church, it had killed 4 little girls, blinded a couple more, and sent a bunch of other people to the hospital. I couldn't stop wondering if those 2 little girls I saw on the lawn were okay. From my secret hiding place in the living room, I could listen to Mom and Dad, and it seemed like they spent most of their time trying to figure out how they could explain it to us, what had happened. Some of the time they were mad, and some of the time they were calm, and some of the time they just sat on the couch and cried. Even though none of us kids got hurt by the bomb, they acted like they were worried about us. They weren't too worried about Byron and weren't worried at all about Joey. We'd all agreed not to tell her what had happened at the church and had left Birmingham that night before she had a chance to find anything out. I was kind of surprised because the way Mama and Dad were talking, I could tell they were most worried about me. They came out of the kitchen and sat on the couch. I knew they were talking about me again. Mama said, "He's been disappearing, Daniel. Hours go by and I don't know where he is." "What's he say when you ask him where he's been?" "He tells me he hasn't been anywhere," he says. "I shouldn't worry. It's so strange. I call him and he's nowhere to be found, but a few minutes later he just pops up." "Doesn't Byron know where he goes?" "He says he doesn't. He is being awfully quiet." Something's wrong. I wonder if Mr. Roberts' friend was right. I wonder if he really did see Kenny in that church afterward. Lord, who knows what that poor baby saw. Willona, he says, he only left Grandma Sands to tell us Joey was okay. I don't know. What can we do? But Joey swears it was him. She followed away from there, and you know that child would just as soon die as lie. I wish I knew where he goes and why. I had been disappearing, but Mama really didn't need to worry. I wasn't going anywhere. I'd just been going behind the couch for a little while every day. There was a big enough space between the couch and the wall for me to squeeze in back there and just sit in a little ball. It was quiet and dark and still back there. Byron called this little area the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital, and he made me and Joey believe that magic powers and genies and angels all lived back there. I was waiting to see if that was true. He started calling it the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital after we noticed that if something bad happens to one of our dogs or cats, they just automatically know they had to crawl in that space and wait to see if they were going to get better. Since Mom and Dad had told us that animal doctors cost about $1,000 each time you went to see them, our pets knew they wouldn't be seeing any veterinarians, and that the most help they could get was to crawl behind the couch and see if they could make a deal with the magic powers there. If one of our dogs got hit by a car and could walk away, or if one of them chewed through an electrical wire or ran away from home and showed up a couple of weeks later half starved or something, well, they'd head right back for the back of the couch. And if one of our cats got beat up by a dog or spent too much time throwing up some disgusting pieces of things or got thrown out of a tree or something, well, they'd zip straight to the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital. Those times when one of our pets got hurt, I'd wake up the next morning and run out to the living room and climb up on the back of the couch and look over to see how it was doing. If I looked down there and the dog looked up at me with sad eyes and banged its tail a couple of times before he put his head back down, or if the cat looked up and hissed at me, I knew they'd made it through their first night and that the magic powers were probably going to keep them alive. If, when I looked behind the couch, I just saw a crumpled up yellow towel where the dog or cat had been laying, I knew Mom would soon be telling us that Sooty or Fluffy or Scamp or Lady or whoever the patient was hadn't done too well and was to be spending the rest of the time running around happily in cat or dog heaven. But I knew better. I knew this was some made-up garbage. I knew that the magic powers had decided not to keep the animal alive, and Dad had gotten rid of the body before we woke up. It was kind of strange because whatever it was that was behind the couch seemed to work best on dogs. Whenever dogs survived the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital, they always came out a lot friendlier. When they came out, they might walk kind of funny, but it seemed like all they wanted to do was lick you and wobble around after you wherever you went. Blackie had been in the hospital twice, and he got along great with everyone now, even strangers, even cats. But cats were different. If one of them survived the hospital, it'd come out and give you a dirty look and be a lot meaner than it was in before it went in. Most of the time after a cat visited the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital, it wouldn't let anyone but Joetta touch it. But that was okay, because most of the time nobody but Joetta wanted to touch those stupid cats anyway. I was waiting to see if the magic powers were going to treat me like a dog or a cat, or if when Byron or Joey woke up one morning, they'd find a crumpled up yellow towel where I was supposed to be. The only trouble was that the magic powers seemed to be taking a real long time to decide what was going to happen to me. Maybe I wasn't spending enough time back there. Mama started trying to force me to do more things with Rufus, but it seemed like he'd changed while we were gone and wasn't as much fun to be with. Him and Cody got real happy when I gave them my pillowcase full of dinosaurs. I was getting too mature to play with toys anymore. Mama even forced Byron to take me with him when him and Buphead played basketball. But you didn't have to be Albert Einstein to figure out the only reason the big guys were playing with me was because Byron had threatened them when my back was turned. But what really bugged me the most was when Mama tried to force me to do things with Joetta. I'd never noticed what a little crybaby and snitch she was. Every time you turned around, she was threatening to go tell on you or was whining about something being just her plain old past self. After a while, to get even with her, I wouldn't even look at her. I started hating her guts. I only wanted to come out of the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital to eat and go to the bathroom. I even started going into it after Mom and Dad went to bed at night. I started sleeping there. I spent so much time there that Byron finally figured out where I was going. I looked up one day, and there were his eyeballs staring down at me. Hi, Bye. Hey, Kenny. So this is where you've been hanging out, huh? Are you going to tell on me? Man, when you ever known me to be a snitch? Never. You're right. He just kept looking at me. You want me to get you something to eat? Byron walked over and turned on the TV, and then stuck his head back behind the couch. You want to watch some TV? His head disappeared, and he watched Bat think. When the show was over, his head came back. I'm going to go play some ball. You want to come? I'll come in a minute. By looked like he didn't believe me. Cool, later. Even though Byron had a reputation for not being a snitch, I got the feeling he told on me. When they sat on the couch, Mom and Dad quit talking like nobody was around and got real careful about what they said. They started saying stuff about how proud they were of me and what a nice kid I was and junk like that. But it sounded like they'd been practicing what to say. I turned my ears off when they came around. Mama also quit bugging me to find out where I was going. I knew they'd busted me for sure when Joetta's snitchy little face started peeking around the couch every morning. Byron even started sleeping on the couch at night. Right after Mom and Dad went to bed and I crawled back there, he'd come out with his pillow and blanket. Night, Kenny. Night, Bye. Every morning I'd wake up and Byron would be looking down at me, and he'd wake me up by touching the top of my head. Hey, Kenny. Hi, Bye. You ready to eat? Come on. I crawled out from behind the couch and let Byron pour my cereal and milk. After I finished, I said, thanks. Wait, ain't you going to change out of them PJs? Oh, yeah. I changed and went back to the couch. Bye was sitting there. Hold on, Kenny. Watch some cartoons with me. Okay, I will in a minute. Byron grabbed my arm before I could crawl behind the couch. No, man, at least stay for Felix the cat. Okay. I sat next to him on the couch. When Felix was over, I thought Bye had forced me to watch more cartoons, but he didn't. He let me crawl back behind the couch. Check you out later, Kenny. See you, Bye. As much time as Byron started spending on the couch, I thought I was going to have to make room for him, a bed for him in the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital. Every time I'd look up, he'd be there, and we'd have to go eat or watch some TV or go off to Mitchell's for something or change clothes or stuff like that. One day his head popped over the back of the couch and he said, come on, I got something to show you. I knew I had to go. If I wouldn't, he'd pull me out by my legs. I followed Byron upstairs to the bathroom, and he stood in front of the sink and looked in the mirror. He scrunched his face up so he could see the bottom of his chin, and then he took his thumb and finger and felt around there. He smiled and real slow pulled the thumb and finger away. Check this out, Jack. I looked real close, and there was a long, skinny black hair growing out of Byron's chin. He held it like it was worth $1 million. And there's another one coming in too. This made me wonder about my mustache. I hadn't looked at it for a long time, and I thought it might be pretty long by now. I climbed up on the toilet, and I leaned over the sink to see. Maybe it was because I hadn't looked in the mirror for so long, but as soon as I saw myself with my lazy eyes still being lazy and my face looking so sad, I slammed my eyes shut, and I started crying. I even fell off the toilet. Byron caught me and set me on the floor. He knew this was some real embarrassing stuff, so he closed the bathroom door and sat on the tub and waited for me to stop, but I couldn't. I felt like someone had pulled a plug on me, and every tear inside was rushing out. As if there was a forest fire somewhere, all Smokey the Bear would have to do was hold me upside down over it, and that fire wouldn't have a chance. Byron sat next to me on the floor and put my head in his lap. I still couldn't stop, even though I was soaking him worse than Joey ever drooled on anybody. It was real embarrassing. I'm sorry, Bye. Shut up and cry if you want. That sounded like a real good idea, so I did. I think I cried for about 2 hours. Why would they do that, Byron? I was sounding real bad. My throat was jumping around in my neck and making a bunch of weird noises. Why would they hurt some little kids like that? He waited a long time before he answered. I don't know, Kenny. Mom and Dad say they can't help themselves, that they did it because they're sick. But I don't know. I never heard of no sickness that makes you kill little girls just because you don't want them in your school. I don't think they're sick at all. I think they just let hate eat them up and turn them into monsters. But it's okay now. They can't hurt you here. It's all right. My Adam's apple felt like it was going to blow a hole in my throat, but I said, I did go to the church. And I saw what happened. I saw 2 of those little girls. I thought Joey got killed too. We all did, Kenny. There ain't nothing wrong with being sad or scared about that. I'm scared about it too. I got real scared too. But, man, no one's going to hurt you here, Kenny. But Bye. I tried to think of how to say it. I'm not scared. I'm just real ashamed of myself. That was it. That was the main thing I'd finally found out about for being a patient in the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital. Kenny, you ain't got nothing to be ashamed of. But you don't know what happened, Byron. You don't know what I did. Man, everybody cried. Mama was crying. Dad was scared. He cried too. That was some real scary stuff. And that was some real sad stuff. He still didn't understand. Byron, I left Joey. I thought Woolpool had her, and instead of fighting him like you did, I left. I ran from him. How come you were brave enough to fight him and all I could do was run? All I could do was save a shoe, a stupid ripped up shoe. I couldn't stop crying. Oh man, you ain't gonna start talking that Woolpool mess again, are you? I told you the Woolpool was some made up garbage. I told you the only one I was fighting in the water was your stupid little behind. Wasn't nobody in that water but you and me. And that's what you think, By, but I know better. I've seen him twice. I couldn't believe Byron was still talking to me. Most of the time, if I started sounding weepy and whiny, he'd just take off. Look, Kenny, if you don't quit talking about that Woolpool nonsense, I'm going to leave you here to cry all alone. There ain't no such thing as a Woolpool. And he stopped sounding so mean and he said, and there ain't no such thing as magic powers neither. I was surprised he brought up the magic powers. You think I don't know why you've been hanging out behind the couch? He grabbed my ear and twisted my head until I had to look at him. You think I don't know you're waiting for some stupid magic powers or genies or an angel to make you feel better? Well, dig this. You can't wait behind that couch for the rest of your life, and ain't no magic powers going to come back there and make you feel nothing. Only thing that's going to happen back there is you're going to stunt your growth from being in a little ball all day. He pulled my ear to make sure I was listening. If you've been spending so much time thinking about how you didn't save Joey, why don't you stop and think about why she wasn't in that church? Why don't you spend some time thinking about who it was that led her away? But it wasn't me, Byron. I never... Man, shut up and listen. He twisted my ear to make me quiet. Ain't no genies in the world, Kenny. Ain't no magic powers. Ain't no angels. Not in this neighborhood anyway. Man, I just don't get you. You're supposed to be the one who's so smart. How can you believe in something as stupid as magic powers and genies living behind a couch and not believe that a part of you that took Joey out of that church? Byron started throwing me curveballs. If you hadn't been born, who would have took her away from that bomb? No one. If you hadn't been born, she'd have walked out of that hot church and saw some stranger waving at her from across the street. You think she would have followed him? Heck no. She'd have gone right back in there. If you hadn't been born, who would have gone in that church to see if Joey was really there? Me and Mom and Dad were all too scared. You was the only one brave enough to go in there. Every time he made a point, he twisted my ear to make me understand better. But Byron, it's just not fair. What about those other kids? You know, they had brothers and sisters and mamas and daddies who loved them just as much as we love Joey. How come no one came and got them out of that church? How's it fair? How come their relatives couldn't come and warn them? Byron let go of my ear and thought for a second. Kenny, things ain't never going to be fair. How's it fair that two grown men could hate Negroes so much that they'd kill some kids just to stop them from going into school? How's it fair that even though the cops down there might know who did it, nothing will probably ever happen to those men? It ain't. But you gotta understand, that's just the way it is. And keep on stepping. Byron let me sniff and wipe my hand across the eyes before he slid my head back on the linoleum and stood up. He went over and got some toilet paper, wiped my tears and my boogers off his legs. And then he let a couple of sheets of toilet paper float down and land on me and said, blow your nose, wash your face. You've been behind that couch long enough. It's about time you cut this mess out. Mom and Dad beginning to think you're a little behind is seriously on the blink. Today is the day you check out of the world-famous Watson Pet Hospital. And don't let me kid you back there no more. You ain't got no cause to be ashamed or scared of nothing. You're smart enough to figure this one out yourself. Besides, you're getting the word from the top wolf himself. You're gonna be all right, baby bro. I swear for God. He walked over to the mirror and scrunched his face up so he could look at his chin again, and then used his thumb and finger to pull out that long, skinny black hair out a little bit. He let the hair go, smiled at himself, and ran his hands along his head like he was brushing his hair. Shoot, he said, I sure wish someone would come clean and tell me who my real folks was. There just ain't no way two people as ugly as your mom and daddy could ever have a child as fine as me. He blew himself a kiss in the mirror and then left the bathroom. Before he shut the door, I could see that Mom and Dad and Joey was standing there in a little knot, trying not to let me know they were eavesdropping. Mama whispered, "What's going on, Bi? Why was Kenny crying like that? Is he okay?" He told her, "Kenny's gonna be cool. He's related to me, ain't he?" Byron Watson, how many times am I gonna have to tell you about saying ain't? Some of the time it was hard to figure Byron out. He was very right about some things and he was very wrong about some things. He was very wrong when he said whirlpool was something he'd made up. If he'd ever had his ankle grabbed by it, he'd know for real it was for real. And if he'd ever seen the way it was crouched down, crawling around in the dust and smoke of the church in Birmingham, he'd know it wasn't some made-up garbage. If he'd ever seen those horrible toes, he'd know the whirlpool was as serious as a heart attack. He was also very wrong about there not being anything like magic powers or genies or angels. Maybe those weren't the things that could make a run-over dog walk without wobbling, but they were out there. Maybe they were in the way your father smiled at you, even after you messed up something real bad. Maybe they were in the way you understood that your mother wasn't trying to make you the laughing stock of the whole school, and she'd call you over in front of a bunch of your friends and you spit on her finger to wipe the sleep out of your eyes. Maybe it was the magic powers that let you know that she was just being mama. Maybe they were the reasons you really didn't care when the kids would say, "Yuck, you let your mama slob on you?" And you had to say, "Shut up, that's my mama, we got the same germs." Maybe there were genies in the way your sister would throw a stupid tea party for you and you had fun even though it was kind of embarrassing to sit at a little table and sip water out of a plastic teacup. Maybe there were magic powers hiding in the way your old brother made up all the worst things in the neighborhood, all the worst thugs in the neighborhood played basketball with you, even though you double dribbled every time and they threw the ball to you. And I'm sure there was an angel in Birmingham when Grandma Sands wrapped her arms around all the weird Watsons and said, "My family, my beautiful, beautiful family." I climbed up on the toilet and leaned over the sink to take a look. I smiled. Byron was right about some things too. He was very right when he said I was too smart to believe in magic powers and live behind a couch. He also knew what he was talking about when he said I was going to be all right. Joetta banged on the bathroom door. Kenny, Byron, said you're feeling much better now. If that's right, get on out. I got to go to the bathroom real bad. She said real like it had a million letters in it. Some of the time I wonder if there really was something wrong with me. A few minutes ago I'd been crying on the floor like a kindergarten baby, and now I was looking in the mirror laughing. I blew my nose and I splashed a little water on my face because I wanted to go out. Besides, I had to think of a way to get at least half of my dinosaurs back from Rufus. Come on in, Joey. And that's the end of the book. That was beautiful. Very touching. Maybe there is something magic in families. It's really something to think about. Byron sure turned into a cool guy at the end, didn't he? I mean, he was flat out kind to Kenny. He was a real big brother to him. He pulled him out from behind that couch. Said, "You were brave. You got nothing to be ashamed of." He's a good big brother. They're a good family. It's just so horribly sad what happened. And that really happened in Birmingham. That really happened. People threw bombs in churches. 4 little girls got killed that day. Remember these 4 little girls? Abby, Denise, I can't read backwards. Carol, Cynthia. What could get in somebody's head to make them think that's a good idea? I don't know. Mom and Daddy said maybe they're just full of hate. Just let hate eat them up. Well, I said I'd read this epilogue, so here it is. See, it's an epilogue. Let's hear what Christopher Paul Curtis has to say about the whole thing. Oh, that was hard to read. It's just so sad. At the time of the Watsons family trip, the U.S. South was caught up in a struggle for basic human rights that became known as the Civil Rights Movement. Although the Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal, and the Constitution had been amended after the Civil War to extend the rights and protections of citizenship to African Americans, changing the law of the land did not always change the way people behaved. In the northern, eastern, and western states, African Americans often faced discrimination, but it was not as extreme and pervasive, means there was a lot of it, as in the South. The communities and states passed laws that allowed discrimination in schooling, housing, and job opportunities. They prohibited interracial marriage and enforced segregation by keeping separate facilities for African Americans and whites. In most of the South, African Americans were not permitted to attend the same schools as whites or to use the same parks, playgrounds, swimming pools, hospitals, drinking fountains, or bathrooms. Hotels, restaurants, and stores would not serve African Americans. The worst sections of public facilities were set aside for coloreds only. White children often attended large, well-equipped modern schools, while African American students went to one-room schoolhouses without enough books or teachers. Rigged laws and tests prevented African Americans from voting. A number of organizations and individuals worked tirelessly to end segregation and discrimination. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is called the NAACP. The Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, as well as Thurgood Marshall, John Lewis, Ralph Abernathy, Medgar Evans, Fannie Lou Hamner, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., along with many other people whose names have been forgotten. These men and women strove to change the laws through non-violent resistance. They adopted many of the techniques that Mohandas Gandhi had used to liberate India from British rules: sit-ins and boycotts of stores and public transportation. They applied economic pressure. Freedom riders, African Americans and whites, took bus trips throughout the South to test federal laws that banned segregation in interstate transportation. Black students had enrolled in segregated schools such as Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas, and the University of Alabama. Picketing, protest marches, and demonstrations made headlines. Civil rights workers carried out programs for voter education and registration. The goal was to create tension and provoke confrontation that would force the federal government to step in and enforce the laws. Often the tension exploded into gunshots, fires, and bombings directed against the people who so bravely fought for change. The characters and events in this novel are fictional. However, there were many unsolved bombings in Birmingham at the time of the story, including the one that took place at the 16th Street Baptist Church on September 15th, 1963. 4 young teenage girls, Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carol Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley, were killed when a bomb went off during Sunday school. Addie Mae Collins' sister, Sarah, had to have an eye removed, and another girl was blinded. In the unrest that followed the bombings, 2 other African American children died. 16-year-old Johnny Robinson, who was shot to death by police, and 13-year-old Virgil Wade was murdered by 2 white boys. Although these may be nothing more than names in a book to you now, you must remember that these children were just as precious to their families as Joetta was to the Watsons, or as your brothers and sisters are to you. Despite the danger, the civil rights movement grew stronger, gaining support all over the country. On August 28, 1963, 200,000 people marched on Washington, D.C. to pressure Congress to pass the Civil Rights Bill, and heard Martin Luther King Jr. deliver his unforgettable "I Have a Dream" speech. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill on July 2, 1964, and signed the Voting Rights Act on August 6, 1965. In 1968, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act. The individuals who supported the civil rights movement took great risks to force America to change. It was a people's movement inspired by the courageous acts of ordinary citizens like Rosa Parks, the seamstress from Montgomery, Alabama, who began the first great effort of the movement, the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 and 1956, when she refused to give up her seat to a white man. Many heroic people died in the struggle for civil rights. Many others were injured or arrested or lost their homes or businesses. It's almost impossible to imagine the courage of the first African American children who walked into a segregated school, or the strength of parents who permitted them to face the hatred and violence that awaited them. They did it in the name of a movement, in the quest for freedom. These people are true American heroes. They are the boys and girls, the women and men who have seen things that are wrong and have not been afraid to ask, why can't we change this? They are people who believe that as long as one person is being treated unfairly, we all are. These are our heroes, and they still walk among us today. One of them may be sitting next to you as you read this, or standing in the next room making your dinner, or waiting for you to come outside and play. One of them may be you. So I don't know if you followed all that. He gave us a lot of information. You know, if you were ever like going to do a research project and you got to pick something, maybe you might want to, learn more about this time in our country's history. It's fascinating, and it's fascinating the bravery that people showed to change things through nonviolent protest. It means I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to show you what you're doing is wrong. Things have gotten a lot better. Things could probably get a lot better still, couldn't they? Yeah. Well, I just love the way he did that. I love the way he creates this family that anybody could identify with. There's Kenny pretending to shave while he's watching his dad shave. How many little boys have done that? Sticking their hands out the window. I love that. Grabbing at God's beard, feeling like cool air. Just going on a road trip. So many families can identify with that. They can think, well, that's exactly like my family. And maybe there needs to be a lot more books like this. I thought it was a good one. Hey, I hope you liked it. I'll see you around town. Adios, my friends.